Good evening, everybody. Welcome to a meeting of Colchester City Council's Cabinet. Let me give the usual necessary protocols a quick airing. So a welcome to everybody here, so welcome to those online. Let me just remind you, if there's an emergency, we'll be leaving the building or responding. But there are no practice alarms planned. If alarm sounds, please evacuate the town hall down the main staircase or the back staircase, the High Street, car park behind the town hall and Rumwold Street. This meeting is being streamed live over the internet on the council's YouTube channel. Will also be available to listen to afterwards. The use of mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, by visitors is welcome, but you're requested to use them discreetly, not to disturb meeting, to set them to silent, not use voice or camera flash, please. Speakers are reminded that microphones will be used at all times. Let me introduce the work of the Cabinet. The Cabinet's the main executive body of the Council. It's responsible for day-to-day decision-making on all Council services and makes recommendations to full Council on major policy issues and on the Council's budget. The Cabinet's made up of 8 councillors, each of whom is responsible for a particular range of services. They're here in front of you. Let me introduce myself, and I'll ask those around the table, including the officers around the table, to introduce themselves first. And my name is David King, leader of the Council, and I'll go to Councillor Goss, just to get him off his phone. Martin.
Council business, dear boy. Martin Goss, I'm the Cabinet Member for Waste, Neighbourhoods and Leisure, and also Mile End Councillor, amongst many other things.
Councillor Lee Scaldis, Portfolio Holder for Culture, Heritage and Environment, and Ward Member for Old Heath Hive and the beautiful village of Rowhedge.
Councillor Jocelyn Law, Communities and Public Protection Portfolio, and Councillor for Highwoods Ward.
Good evening, Councillor Mark Corey, Resources and Assets Portfolio Holder and representative of the wonderful small town of Wivenhoe.
Good evening, Julie Young, Deputy Leader of the Council, Cabinet Member for Housing and Health, Ward Member for Greensted.
Lindsay Barker, Deputy Chief Executive.
Andrew Weavers, Head of Governance and Monitoring Officer.
Richard Clifford, Democratic Services Manager.
Anna D'Alessandro, Interim Chief Finance Officer in Section 151.
Chris Pearson, Portfolio Holder for Economic Growth and Transformation, and Councillor for Beerchurch, which I believe is probably about the oldest part of the urban part of the city.
Good evening, Councillor Andrea Luxford-Vaughan, Portfolio Holder for Planning and Sustainability, Ward Councillor for Wivenhoe. No further explanation.
And that's how the first 5 minutes of our life goes, doesn't it? Thank you all very much indeed. And it's right to have pride in the city and pride in place. Urgent items, I believe we have none.
There are none, Chair.
Item 3 is declarations of interest. I know you are, but I invite you to declare anything that's relevant, financial or otherwise. None. Item 4, minutes. I invite Cabinet to approve the minutes of the meeting of the 3rd of September. Thank you very much. And then we'll go on to have your say. I'll take this in the order that I have it. Sir Bob Russell, please. Bob, you know this form really well.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to speak about grounds maintenance in a minute. I declare non-pecuniary interest that I'm patron of Colchester and East Essex Cricket Club, and I'm sure the whole council are delighted that Colchester are this year's Essex champions. But before I come on the grounds maintenance, in the last 2 hours I've had this leaflet delivered to my house by Royal Mail. You have to read right to the end before you find out it's from Essex County Council. It's blatant propaganda. I thought it was a flying pig up the end there, but it is actually a plane. The word democracy and democratic accountability doesn't appear at all. I object to my council taxpayer money being used on propaganda like this, particularly when it's contrary to what this council wants. And it's just absolutely outrageous. Coming on to the grounds maintenance, I've read in the paper that it's going to be brought in-house if Amphora is in-house. I mean, it's not under the democratic direct control of council. Certainly it's better than outsourcing. I never have been a supporter of outsourcing because it's always the case that outsourced companies are there for one objective, and that's to make a profit out of taxpayers' money. And I believe this is the third company, Iverdi. I can't remember when it started. I don't think anybody around the table was involved in that decision whenever it was made all that time ago. But I am concerned that I'm reading that the council is trying to balance the books on grounds maintenance. Chairman, can you confirm there have been cuts in the grounds maintenance budget in recent years? And my concern is that on the one hand, you've got a serious financial challenge which you're trying to address. That's the left hand. And then the right hand is bringing forward schemes which is going to add quite dramatically to the grounds maintenance costs. And I'm referring here to two. One is Holy Trinity Churchyard, and the other one is this ludicrous scheme from St Botolph's railway station up the old bus station site, both of which are going to involve significant daily grounds maintenance costs, which hitherto are not there. And I'll just concentrate on Holy Trinity because that's the first one. I stand to be corrected, but I believe the grounds maintenance costs of that are £200 a year. £200 a year, not a lot. And it is an oasis in the centre of Colchester City, and it should be treated as that and not converted into a manicured park with benches, seats and all the rest of it, which is the capital cost is one thing, but when I've inquired as to the revenue costs of the grounds maintenance and actually operating this on a daily basis, and we know it's going to be an antisocial hotspot anyway, and no, there's no point shaking your head, Chairman, you've admitted there's a risk. We're only talking here about how big that risk is. And the cost of grounds maintenance is going to go up.
Thank you, Sir Bob. I'll ask Councillor Goss if he wants to round this out, but let me just, if I can, reply in reverse order. So, of course, it's true that if we add facilities which need maintenance, there is a cost. I can't give you one. I think they're relatively minor, is my view. We do differ, don't we, about Holy Trinity Church and the value of it. I think the collective view, including members, was in the round. They would add a real value in a different form, perhaps, to the past. To your, if I can say, the substantive points in a moment on ECC, as Councillor Goss and Cabinet will talk through later on, and it's been through due process, including scrutiny, yes, we are trying to do a balancing job between demand and cost. It's our view that ID Verdi's staff will welcome a transition that is in effect in-house. Good for them. That Amphora, who have some experience, including the MDs in this field, can bring something fresh to this. So in the balancing act of demand and standards and cost, yes, we'll have to see where that settles, but the best prospect for doing this well and to keep to the standards that you and the public would want to see met lies with the option that's in front of us. But you'll excuse me if I don't go further, because that's a conversation we will have to have in a moment. To my last and your first point about ECC and their positioning on, for those who didn't realise this, on local government reorganisation and the note that you have seen which presses that case, I am, like others across the county, very unhappy about it. I've spoken to the leader of the county council personally. It isn't my conversation, it's brief, but it said what I thought needed to be said, that this wasn't helpful for the cooperation that's essential across Essex if local government reorganisation is to be delivered well, and that can only be done together. The 10 councils that support the option this council has gone for, so 9 others plus us, have written to ministers to make our views plain. We have been constructive in our language, as we will be constructive when he or others give a ruling, but we've been very clear about this. The difference between ourselves and county on this is clear in terms of the geography and the position and what we think is good for this place. But in terms of publicity, is that you shouldn't pay for it and you should always acknowledge the other options, and unfortunately county haven't. I would be happier if they had that acknowledgement in there. Thank you.
It's no secret that we've had to make service reductions to make cost savings. You're absolutely right. And a good example is where we used to cut the grass 14 times a year and we cut it down to 6, pardon the pun. Yep, 6 a year. So on average, once a month between the months of roughly March, April up to October, November, and we can flex that within that as well and move it. If, for instance, there's nothing to cut, we don't cut it because it's a waste of time, and we move it. So we do have some flexibility within that. And our own land we cut 8 times a year. And one of the reasons that we went from 14 cuts to 6 cuts a year was because the county council was only paying us a very small percentage, and we were subsidising it in Colchester. So we had to have some conversations with the county council about that, because I'm afraid when you're having to decide how many times a year to maintain things, you have to do it within the envelope that you've got. So we have remedied that, and we also do borders less. We do them 4 times a year. We used to do them more than that. So yes, that's why things look different, and I'll cover it under 8.1, but I do think the bringing it back in is the better approach, because at least you've got more control over it. But I'll cover that liberally for you later.
Chairman, thank you for your robust response on local government, and my thanks to Councillor Goss for his answer there. But I think that answer reinforces my point that the council should not be embarking on new projects which are going to add to the revenue consequences. And I do urge you, even at this late stage, to realise that adding to the costs of grounds maintenance is going to be quite expensive. But nobody will say what it is. So you're embarking on a capital project at Holy Trinity without knowing what the revenue consequences are. And I don't think that's the way forward. I'll leave on this thought. Remembrance Sunday is coming up. I do hope that the grass around the War Memorial is in a better condition than it is at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Spot. Alicia Carrington. Alicia. They'll give you a warning shout, 2 minutes, and have a further minute to the close. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Hello. I'm speaking about the weed killer glyphosate. Glyphosate has been proven to be carcinogenic and hormone disrupting. By reintroducing this weed killer, the individuals who make this decision will be demonstrating a lack of integrity. Councillor and Chair of the Environment and Sustainability Panel, Sam McCarthy, said that he had read the paper proving glyphosate is cancer-causing, that it was a very thorough paper, yet he went on to say that he was backing its reintroduction rather than establishing a community volunteers scheme. Councillor McCarthy has been employed to represent the residents in the Shrub End ward and has chosen to take this job. I would expect councillors, representatives of the people, to show respect for their people's well-being and to maintain integrity to the science presented. During a TED Talk in Sydney, Australia, by a woman called Sarah Wilson, called How to Respond to Societal Collapse, Wilson said, "When we choose to face truth front on, no matter how brutal it might be, we experience something called congruence, and that is felt in the human body as a sense of belonging, a sense of arrival, and a sense of eerie relief." Councillor Catherine Spindler, during the Environment and Sustainability panel, said that she whisked through the paper quickly and referred to the reintroduction of glyphosate as a small decision right now. This small decision is no such thing, and I find it disrespectful that a councillor a representative of the people thinks it is such? How do you think the people will feel knowing that their representative regards the reintroduction of a cancer-causing and hormone-disrupting chemical back into the area that they call their home as something trivial? Councillor Catherine Spindler said curiously during the panel, if Tendring are already using glyphosate, we're going to slowly mould into that destination. This was soon followed by Councillor McCarthy saying, none of us know what is happening in that regard, which seemed humorous to some members present. As Colchester City Council decides during this Cabinet meeting, I do hope we demonstrate to our residents that we have a backbone and that we can make critical decisions based on the science before us, rather than sheepishly following suit of a district council out of ease. Everyone here today has chosen to take these jobs where we represent citizens in Colchester. Take time to look inwards, to reflect on what you say. Sarah Wilson, during her TED Talk, goes on to say that societal collapse is often referred to as a simplification, a kind of undoing of all the complexity that we have been doing that has been destroying our planet. Collapse is now forcing us to go back to community, to connecting, to collaborating. If we speak our truths, we will find that we all want the same things for ourselves and for our families: happy, healthy, and fulfilling lives. The big decision to reintroduce glyphosate will hinder us from reaching our common goals. The alternative, community collaboration, is necessary. All it takes is for us to speak our truths. It can only be done together. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I'll just give only a few remarks because this subject will come up. There'll be other speakers and we'll be having a conversation around this table and I've no doubt after we leave Cabinet. So allow me to gently say to you that truth, of course, is viewed from many angles, is it not? And I have to say that knowing both those councillors well, these are not people who take lightly their responsibilities, and I just ask you to sort of see that in a rounded way. So respect has to be mutual. These are people who stand to be a member of this council. That's an uncomfortable thing. They will get it in the ear like all of us do some of the times. Who's to say when that's right or wrong? But it's not lightly done. I think that's the point I want to say to you. They are thoughtful people who have been thoughtful given the advice that they've got. And I don't want to say too much about this, but full council has taken a similar view. This is about, I'll just say this last thing, about a very, very limited and controlled safe application of what is still a licensed product in much of the world. But the all emotional take on this, absolutely, I'm sure my colleagues and I do here. So thank you, and thank you for having the courage to. It's not always comfortable to come to this setting, and we hope to make it so. So thank you for speaking your truth.
I never intend to cause any disrespect. I just, from what I watched, I think I felt they think it's a light decision, but I just feel passionate that it's not.
It's good to hear the passion. We need that. Thank you. But I know that they're thoughtful. I've spoken to them since. Thank you very much, though, for coming and for your elaboration.
Thank you.
Right, and we'll go to the first item on the formal agenda, which is 7.1, City Fit for the Future, the Strategic Plan Delivery Plan. So just a reminder for the record and for the public, this council adopted its current strategic plan in 23, which has a strategic plan delivery plan, which sets out what we're going to do and what we're going to achieve. We're collectively and across the chamber committed to doing the best that we can. This is something that's owned by full council but overseen by Cabinet, you have to look at what you set out to do. And this paper captures both our formal statements, but those changes that we think are appropriate, both to capture what has been done and the status of it, and to acknowledge some minor changes. So that's the paper that's in front of us and the public, and I'll just ask for any views from Cabinet members about what they've seen. I'll go fraction of a second ahead to Councillor Pearson, then to the Deputy Leader.
Thank you, Leader. I think just a reminder that this is the 23 to 26 strategic plan that was approved, as you've already stated, by full council. This is a review of where we're at, and we see in the plan that there are 6 strategic outcomes that we're focused on: responding to climate emergency, delivering homes for those most in need, improving health, well-being and happiness across the city of Colchester, growing our economy so that everyone benefits, delivering modern services for a modern city, and celebrating our city heritage and culture. And I think there are a number of things that have happened over the past year that point to successes in each of those areas. The paper goes on to show some new proposals to tackle some of those issues, and also some of the things that have been removed as actions because they have already been delivered. And I want to thank the officers of the council for doing that, and the officer of the council who's put this report together for us this evening. I know that Jazara has done a lot of work on this. I've spent a fair bit of time with Jazara going through it, and I'm happy to put it before you for approval this evening.
Thank you. Julie.
Thanks very much, Leader. I think, there may appear to be some sort of small items on the refreshed strategic plan. I think, the mention of 2 compactor bins, for example, doesn't sound very much, does it? But as we have to balance our budget, as we've talked about already in terms of the cuts to the greening agenda, we know that those bins create more capacity. They need to be emptied far less than the traditional bins, and actually they're working very successfully in many parts of the city area. On temporary accommodation, we've done a really good piece of work with Beyond the Box, which has not only cut costs to the council but improved the environment for people that are living in temporary accommodation to have access to cooking facilities and kitchen and somewhere to sit. There's a lot of people, in bed and breakfast accommodation is a really poor outcome, especially for children. The decorating hub, which is great, it's turning housing into homes, giving people support to actually do their homes up, and it's a great partnership with Emmaus. Play parks, lots of work on play parks, which will be welcomed by many communities throughout the city area, and we're in consultation for that at the moment. That's to be welcomed. And the Community Asset Fund, giving money to various parts of the city area to develop new or improve assets that already exist. So I think there's a lot to celebrate, Leader, in this report. Whilst we focus very much on cuts, I think there are some of the things that we can actually celebrate that we're doing, which will improve people's lives in Colchester.
Thank you. Absolutely agree. Councillor Scordis-Lee.
Thank you, Chair. And again, I think the report does show that we are making progress, and it's important that we are updating it with our new objectives. I know that fly tipping was one of our red flags that had appeared this last year, and that we are trying to deal with effectively. And some of you may have seen that some bins have, this is a fly tipping scene rather than a crime scene, but trying to get that message out there. We can obviously speak to the fact that the work we did on Middlewick has been really successful for local residents, because Natural England have been very clear that that site should not be built on. So that obviously very helpful for my residents, but a lot of residents in Colchester. I guess the only thing I would flag is the compactor bins are great, and they do tell you when people are using them. So we noticed in Barrack Street, 3 in the morning seems to be a time when someone's using them, and well, there's a few kebab stores there, so I wonder if could be them who might need to pay for business collection. But that's helped the intelligence of our teams on the ground. But there's a question of recycling there, because it could be argued that it's much easier just to chuck all your rubbish in a black bin and chuck it in there, and we're not recycling as much as we can. So I think moving forward, there possibly is something to look at about, again, how can we get people recycling more? Because we get more recycling credits for that. We're paying less in landfill tax that we have to pay as residents when we're sending black bags. So it's how we can be more effective in educating, and a bit of carrot and stick, I guess, is always probably your approach, isn't it, Councillor Goss? You need a bit of both. But other than that, I think we're making good progress moving ahead, and as I say, happy with most of the updates there.
Jocelyn, Councillor Moore.
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Just briefly, sort of echoing some of what's been said already, I think it's really good to see that we've been making progress, but also that we're enabling residents to make improvements in their lives and sort of work with us collaboratively. I think in terms of things like compact bins, providing, obviously I take on board the points about recycling, but we're providing bins that help keep neighbourhoods clean and tidy, and we know that's something that really matters to residents. And also around the work on play parks, that is so important, because if you can encourage fit and active younger people, you're building in lifetime habits. And we've spoken a lot in these meetings about place-based approach to health going forward and new ways of working. And we know that we need to encourage residents to kind of take ownership over their health. And I think it's good to start building in those habits at an early point. And that's why I think that's very important. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great additional point. Councillor Goss, Martin.
Really some more factual points. We don't actually put any rubbish in the ground now, of course, because Essex, being the last authority in the country, I think, to actually stop sticking stuff in the ground, we now push it forward to a plant that in effect creates energy and actually does create recycling, because some of what gets processed will fall out the back end and will end up being recycled. So that is actually pushing our recycling up, and all of our litter bins and dog bins ends up at that facility. So it is being, I'm more comfortable with the way it's being processed now than just sticking it in the ground. I really am, where nappies go for 500 years. But the compactor bins, yes, are good, but they are expensive, thousands of pounds. And the one in the high street looks absolutely dreadful and is going to get moved for a more aesthetically pleasing one, because I just think it looks dreadful, and that's supporting what Sir Bob Russell bought up. So it will be moved to a better one installed. In terms of play parks, I do get rather annoyed sometimes when people try and influence a process, because the way that we've done the play parks, we have ensured that it has been done on a fair, robust methodology. So it isn't influenced by councillors who go to the paper or those that shout loudest. It's been done fairly based on how poor that equipment is or when it was last done. So in St John's, I think some of the equipment's 40 years old. Even I'm older than it, but it's 40 years old, and therefore that's why it's high priority. Whereas other equipment has been recently upgraded, or there's been work done on those play parks, and we've done it on a tiering system, and we've done it fairly, and it's been led by an agreed criteria, not by who shouts loudest. And that is not going to change the way the play parks are done. I just wanted to be clear on that, because we are being fair and strategic so that everybody in Colchester has their play parks looked at on the same criteria out of all of the 73. And I just wanted to be clear on that, so that people don't try and hijack process or methodology and try and get all their play parks shooed in just because they happen to shout loudest. I just wanted to be really clear on that. We are not going to change course. We are being strategic, and that money, that £2 million, is going to be spent fairly across Colchester.
Yeah, thank you. And rounding that out, if I may, I mean, the important thing here is this is yet another investment in place and a way that connects people, frankly, to each other, children to children and to the natural environment. And the COVID inquiry that's just running on now has just been, for me, a reminder of what's being lost. So anything that gets young people of any age out and about in a family setting, play parks are a great way of doing that. Not the only one, but a great way. They add to our other facilities as well. So thank you very much indeed. Are there any other comments here? Before I draw it close, I ought to go. Oh, please do. Mr. Weeks.
Sorry, Chair. Just to remind you that you have got a recommendation from scrutiny as well.
Thank you. I was going to go to that.
On this. And also, Chair, could I suggest that the recommended decision at 2.1 actually refers to the changes which are set out in paragraph 5.5 of the report, just for absolute clarity. Those are the changes that you are agreeing. Thank you.
Thank you. It's amazing how many times you read a document. I was looking at it just now and thinking that could be tidier. Thank you very much for offering us a way of doing that. So yes, in item 7.1 has a couple of issues. One of them is around the review by scrutiny of the strategic plan delivery plan. So for those listening, this is just making sure that the administration of the day, that's represented by us at this table, aren't just running along as we like to see fit. There's a lot of robust checks and balances, and scrutiny panel's one of those. So in that meeting which I attended, we had a good conversation around Cymbeline Meadow, what we could do and what we can't do and what we could afford to do. And in the strategic delivery plan, we acknowledged that on the basis of progress made and funding challenges, that we would stop at where we've got to put it simply. Promise members, because this came up in full council, that we'll issue a note, and Councillor Goss, I'm sure, is all over that. We'll get something round that will be helpful to members in terms of giving them clarity, because there was some confusion around status of different parts of this area of Colchester. But tonight, what we have is a recommendation to take this out of the strategic plan delivery plan. And my view, but I'd like to hear the take of members, is given the progress made, the staged reach, and this is some time ago, and the other pressures we have to manage, I think it will be a false promise to leave this here unless we have funding committed to it. Can I just ask for any views on that? Councillor Pearson, Chris.
Yeah, I attended the scrutiny panel along with you, Chair, and I think the feeling was received by you and I that we needed to go away and have another look at what was in the strategic plan. I know Councillor Goss and I have also asked for further information from the officers just so that we can make a considered decision about how that's taken forward in the strategic plan.
Pressing this to the point, is there a fresh conversation to be had away from here? Because here is the decision to be made to take the plan as drafted in front of us. So are you recommending that we hold on that one item?
I am, Leader.
Okay. Any other views on that? Councillor Goss.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to money, and that's the issue. We have less and less money, and I would agree to keep this in if we had the funding, but there's no point promising projects you can't deliver or are unlikely to deliver. So regrettably, if we can't deliver it, then it should be removed, because otherwise the document is inaccurate, isn't it? I have got a map. That was the question, to remind people of the actual land itself. So I'm happy to take it away and have another look at it, but unless we've got the funding, we can't deliver it. And I think that's part of the issue. It's a strategic plan, but it isn't very strategic if you haven't got the capital to deliver it and you can't fund it. You know, I'm a project manager. I can't deliver projects without funding. In the same way, a body can't survive without blood. So that's
Thank you. I've no, look, we do our business as openly and practically as possible, and we have been round this a few times before we come here, and we're in the position you've just described, which is having, Chris, you're absolutely right, an empathy for members around the scrutiny panel saying, can't we do more? That is where, and it's a great spirit to have in Colchester. Cross-party, a lot of the time we say, well, let's push it and let's see where we go. My personal view, and I'll go to the Deputy Chief Executive, is that's not the circumstances we're in. We have got some very uncomfortable decisions to make over the coming months, and we're starting to make them. There'll be a process, a test and challenge for them. So I'm happy that we bear this in mind when we go through that budgetary process, but in terms of clarity for the document, my recommendation to colleagues is take it as it is, but I'll go to the DCE.
Thank you, Chair. It was just really to clarify, I think you've got a delivery plan in front of you for 25, 26, I think it is. It's this current year. We cannot deliver this scheme in this current year because there is not the budget. But I think our head of greening, Mel Rundle, attended scrutiny and said it's not about cancelling the project, it's about pausing it and then seeking funding through other sources. And some of you will be aware through our planning processes now we can require biodiversity net gain, and you need projects to invest biodiversity net gain into so that there is a kind of tangible outcome. And I think Mel is exploring that because there is still a desire to complete the project. It's just not going to be possible at this stage to guarantee we can do it in this current year. So I think it's a pausing rather than stopping, which is recommended in here. And if on that basis you're comfortable, we will continue to seek alternative sources of funding for it.
Thank you. That's a richer story, isn't it? Are we content on that basis? All right, agreed. Thank you. And with the amendment offered by Mr. Weavers. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, DCE. It's very helpful. I've got to say this to Sir Bob down there. I know you're interested, like me, Sir Bob, in Wildflower Meadows. So let's hope we can have a look at that when the team go back to look at what's possible in St Brian Meadows and keeping it to the standard we want to see it used at. Right, okay. Item 7.2, the balance of this is the, yes, this is on the back of the West Tay issue, where the council did not, as we would normally hope to do, keep members informed of an expression of interest. Was conditional, was withdrawn, when it's plain the conditions can be met, but there was understandable disquiet from members, and we've had that repeated in full council discussion there, and I'll respond when we've digested all of that. But tonight we have in front of us just a recommendation from members after I went to see the scrutiny panel, and simply put it is that elected members be informed and consulted regarding any future potential large-scale projects affecting their wards as an earlier stage as possible. This is our normal good practice. We fell short on this occasion. It can happen. Busy officers and or members of the administration can lose sight of where we are, but this is an important principle that has been debated at length just last week. I'll ask for views from colleagues, but I think we should be in the same place on this. Are we content? Do we accept this? Okay. Thank you. And we'll roll this forward into the formal changes to delegation and governance, which will be put to the Governance and Audit Committee probably sometime before Christmas, as I understand it. Okay, so that's for the record. Nothing else on that? Right, thank you very much. In which case we go to item 7.3, transport interchange update, and have a visiting councillor, Councillor Dundas. At least he's down for this item. Can't see you, Paul, yet. You're hiding from me. I'm troubled you're starting to agree with Councillor Goss. This is very worrying.
Thank you, Leader. Good evening, Cabinet. I spotted this on the agenda, and I just wanted to mention a couple of things which came to mind about it. Firstly, I mean, I might not totally agree with where the Environment Panel are coming from, but it's good to see them being really active at the moment. We've seen lots of recommendations from them because they were struggling a bit to fill meetings. So on this, firstly, I do agree. I think in the sense that, and we've had private discussions about the governance around the town deal and the Levelling Up Fund. I think we're all in agreement that it's, let's just say the governance is suboptimal. It wasn't perhaps necessarily our fault or any of our fault. It was imposed on us in terms of the structure, but we can still look internally how we can improve it. And I think there is still a lack of understanding from a lot of councillors as to how it all works, why it was done the way it is, and where we are on some of the projects. But I mean, we know that some have been delivered. We've got Syndic Square and that, and Jumbo and things. There is progress going on. We're behind, but progress is going on. But I think there is a lack of general knowledge within the council as to where we are on the finances of some of it and the progress, particularly around things like Heart of Grinstead, which we have spoken about. So I think there is a need for that. But what I wanted to pick up on is the St Botolph's roundabout, actually, and perhaps where we need to be a bit more proactive as a council. It's a project I support. That area does need regeneration. I don't think anybody can deny that. And I think it also has to be said, in fairness, both to the We Are Colchester or Team Colchester Board and Essex County Council, we're often accused of not listening to the public and consultations and making consultations a tick box exercise. Well, of course, there was a big consultation around the potential design of that junction, and in response to the public opinions, there were major changes made to the design. So I think criticism that consultations are all just tick boxes in that case is not warranted. I think that it was recognised that that roundabout is a critical piece of infrastructure. But when it comes to actually doing the work on that, I think we need to be really on the ball, and I have brought this up privately within Team Colchester. Earlier in the month, or last month, we had Cadent doing some works there with the infamous delightful porter cabin in the outside lane. That brought total chaos to Colchester because it's not just car drivers, it backed up well beyond the junction with Headgate Street, which meant none of the buses could get round, and it doesn't just affect buses within Colchester, it affects all the buses coming in from Tiptree, from my ward, and out from the other side of town, which come in along Magdalen Street. So you actually had bus timetables in Malden and Brightlingsea and Clacton went completely up the spout because of one roundabout in Colchester. They were really badly designed the way they'd done it. They'd closed the wrong lane, put the cones just in front of it, so nobody knew to get in the right lane. I know there's works going on there at the moment, which are on the inside lane, which are slightly better. But I think we really, really need to make the point that we cannot, as Colchester, have that junction with capacity massively reduced down to one lane for what could be up to 2 years. It is a key junction for not just Colchester, but as it turns out, North Essex, because it affects everybody. So we just really need to be on the ball and make the point, publicly and privately, that however they design those roadworks and however they manage the traffic through it while they're doing it, it's got to keep 2 lanes open for a substantial part of the day in both directions, because we will really have a disaster on our hands otherwise.
Thank you. I'll go to Cabinet members in just a second, Paul, because I think this is worth us staying still for a second, having a bit of a conversation in the spirit of our cross-party working, like we do in Team Colchester. And the reason I want to just talk to this, Mark, is that I spoke today to the head of network resilience at the County Council. It's supposed to be a briefing for us all about Essex, but it was quite good, nobody else turned up, so I took the opportunity to talk about Colchester, which is of course dearest to my heart, although everything else matters, he says swiftly, particularly North East Essex. So let me just walk through and then stay on that last point and then open it up to colleagues. So I welcome your support for what we do cross-party within the mechanisms, the structures, and I will put a note out to members. I was going to talk to it tonight, but I think it might be easier just to write it down. We do have some issues around understanding. We can't change the governance that, for example, around the town deal has been set for us. It came with the money set by government. and we have to work within it. And it is as open as that allows, but there is something about us, I think, refreshing to the extent we can, what we share and when, and we'll look to do that. It does go through, you will know this formal process does go through scrutiny and everything else. But I'm today perhaps a bit more interested in the last point, which is the practicalities of change. So, no surprise for anybody, and Councillor Goss to my right knows this as well as I do, that if you have major works that don't get delivered well, and the bus lanes through Mile End are a fantastic recent example, you have nothing but trouble, nothing but complaint and nothing but congestion, and the latter two are intertwined. We've got to do better. Now, that's understood by county. So a lot will depend, crucially, on the process that's underway now, which we can't comment until it's completed, which is how they select their tenders for works across the city. I know, Councillor Goss happened to be with me, that we put across, and it was really accepted, that county have got to select with care for relative works in parallel works across the city. And then today's conversation alive to that, select well, manage well, and DCE might want to add a remark, or give her that choice if she wants to, is look at all the options and choices in terms of the times of work. This gets down to really interesting arcane things for people like me, like permits. You know, we have 60,000 a year, whatever it might be across the county. We're interested in Colchester, how those permits, the on and off, what lanes are closed, when they're closed, the relationship with the whole network across Colchester. All I can say to you is, I'm clear that that's understood. What we will have to do as representing those who live here is absolutely make sure that that is walked through in depth and we get the best understanding we can. What none of us can do, and I'll stop in a moment, nor can talented people in county who have got it, that this has got to be managed well. What we can't predict is the unpredictable. What we have to insist on is that the contractual arrangements are alive to the needs of businesses and residents and are as flexible and responsive as possible. Last thing for me, seeing businesses tomorrow morning with two senior figures from Essex Highways, and I know that that's their concern too. I'll stop at that, go around the table, Paul, and then I'll come back to you at the close. I saw Chris and then Martin and Lee. Sorry if the order's... Mark, you should have been first. And now you go first, we'll go around, then we go around the table.
Thank you. So I just wanted to say that as a member also of Essex County Council, that I have intense frustration not being able to influence some of their poor decision making when it comes to highways and traffic management. And I think we suffer when talking to people on the doors, we suffer about not having that authority here in Colchester. And that's one of the positives of LGR. I'm not, still not totally convinced, but at least having the Highways Authority more localised would be a good thing. So I do agree with you, Councillor Dundas, especially the example of the Cadent Portaloo, and I actually think Councillor Goss got onto them pretty quick to move it. But for Essex County Council to give approval for that to happen is unacceptable. We've seen problems with Ipswich Road roundabouts. I worry about the St Bottles project, so I do agree with your sentiments. Sir Bob's point earlier about the LGR county leaflet, I'm afraid decisions that county make are too often not in the interests of our residents. Having said all of those negatives about Essex County Council, I would commend you, leader, following after I was leader, trying to improve the relationship with Essex. You've done a much better job. You really have worked well with that team. Colchester, Councillor Dundas is on there as well as cross-party, along with the deputy leader, Councillor Young. And I think having a cross-party representation, your work with county has seen better investment jointly between county and us. It does often need to come with us taking a step forward to contribute, which you could say is sometimes double taxation, but that's what you have to do to bring county to the table. So I do appreciate what you've worked on with the County Council. I take on Councillor Dundas's points and hope that we can do our best with this particular development. In the paper it does say about giving county the authority. I think they do have the authority anyway, and I would like to ensure that actually we keep some authority here to keep the check and balance upon them and their plans and make sure it does not end up something like the Cadent on the Ipswich Road roundabouts. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could, a couple of minutes, if we can keep it brief, Chris and then Martin and Lee. Thank you.
Thank you. I've sat on the Team Colchester group, just as you have, Councillor Dundas, and it's already been alluded to, so has Councillor King and Councillor Young. And I was keen that the work that's taking place there was made available to all members as soon as possible, and I'm pleased that something is now coming forward, because otherwise it was happening in dark corners, in quiet places. I accept that there were reasons and there were governance arrangements that had to be agreed with central government at the time that it was set up, but I think now it's essential that we're as open as possible. The second point that you made about traffic and highways, I've had concerns about how Essex County operates highways for a number of years, and I go back to my time on Essex County Council when the county devolved responsibility for highways to Colchester Borough Council as it was then, and I think it worked much better for the citizens of Colchester, and I look forward to the point in the not too distant future when we have a unitary authority that will be responsible for our own pavements, highways, etc., and will manage this hopefully in a much better way for the residents and businesses of Colchester.
Things have been absolutely shambolic in Colchester, in north, south, east and west, and most of it is caused by permits being given to utility companies, and I've dealt with most of them: Anglian Water, Openreach, Cadent, etc. And they're frankly all as bad as each other, and they seem to be a law upon themselves where they come and dig up the same road 5 times, etc. However, by law, and this is where our parliamentarians need to step up, there is little any authority can do to stop it, because by law they are allowed to do it, and that's part of the difficulty, and that difficulty will become part of the new unitary authorities problem. So until the law is changed by our parliamentarians, the utility companies can pretty much do what they like. And when I first started in the utility industry in 1998, there was the Nurswer Act that was being brought in by the Labour government, which was a really natty piece of legislation which was supposed to stop utility companies digging up the same bit of road 5 times and to make the interchange of the messaging much better for county councils. Well, here we are in 2025 and I haven't seen it improve. In fact, I think it's getting worse. And to finish, Mark is absolutely right. I actually found a spot which would have taken away some paid parking just at St John's Green, where Cadent were asked to move their monstrosity to, which wouldn't have taken the brains of Britain. Now, if I can come up with that as a lay resident and a councillor, then I'm sure there's better we can achieve with the professionals across this piece. And I think that that was a fairly shoddy bit of planning, frankly, and we must do better. But, you know, people do need to realise the limitations of the law as well, and our parliamentarians need to take that back.
Yeah, I would just say there's lots of limitations on the Highways Authority too. A lot of this is statutory. Law is going to change and increase their ability to act against what we would think as transgressions of good sense, but there are lots of processes all set down in some detail, so they don't have a free hand. They have to engage, they can fine, they do lift works and send contractors who misbehave off on their way and get them to go around the cycle again, but we really ought to forget the sheer complexity of the network that they're having to manage, and nobody can change the capacity limitations of Colchester lightly. That's about what we've got against the pressures that we know we have from population and growth. Lee, please,
Thank you. And I mean, I cover the area as county councillor. I've had a briefing on this very issue, and it is worrying because concurrently we'll have roadworks on East Hill as well. So it's going to be a really difficult year for people in Colchester, especially if they are reliant on their car. And interestingly, we have had a utility company turned down before, which was Cadent, because they put in plans to close Old Heath Road, but the plans weren't good enough, and Essex County Council actually turned it down. So there were signs up with my residents panicking, and I'm looking online going, what are you worrying about? And it turns out that, yeah, they thought they'd get it because it's in law, but actually their plans weren't clear enough. So it was delayed by about 6 months. So there are ways, and I did have the conversations with County Hall. Surely it's not beyond the wit of man to say, yes, these works need to happen, but can they not be done at the same time when we're doing these works on St Botolph's? Because the reply I had back was, oh, well, it's going to be really bad here when we have to do the works here, so we're letting them do it now, and we're giving them 60 days to do it, which they didn't need. So there are question marks of, actually, they need to see more detailed report of why is it taking this long, why do they need a porter cabin where they're putting it, or do they need permission? I probably think they need permission for the porter cabin, they're using highways land. So there was a lot wrong with what happened there. But it's going to be worrying, and I do think we need to keep an eye on County Council. And as others have pointed out, this does show why bringing services like this with one council rather than this two-tier system we have, which is bizarre to most residents, is really important. So I think you are right to highlight this, Councillor Dundas, and I think, yeah, as Colchester City Council, we need to keep an eye on this and hold highways to account if anything does go wrong or we see how things could be better managed.
Thank you. Right, I'm going to draw that to a close, but Paul, before I do.
Very briefly, yeah, thank you for your comments. I mean, yeah, utilities is difficult, very difficult. I mean, and equally in fairness, sometimes work needs to be done. If people's broadband, water or gas goes off, we're not very happy either, are we? These things have to be done. I think, I have to say in fairness to Essex County Council, within Team Colchester, I think we've actually had a very good working relationship with them, and they've been very, very positive. And actually, I think they've been pushing for more cooperation faster than the system, such as it is at the moment, actually allows, in fairness. So I think that that's a great conduit. Team Colchester, I think, has done a lot of good work, and I think to a certain extent it's a little bit shrouded behind curtains that the public and indeed a lot of councillors aren't perhaps fully understanding what it's doing or why it exists, which I think is a shame, because I think if we get the message out there, it's a good example of good working, and I think puts us in quite a good place in terms of relationships between officers and indeed some councillors going forward for LGR. I think in terms of the junction, we just need to look at it and take a common sense approach. You know, there are things you can look at and say, why put a cone there? You need to actually have the 2 lanes going through. So I think if we can just make sure that when we look at the plans, there are 2 lanes going through that junction for the vast majority of the day during the vast majority of the works, then people will at least accept it, and I think we'll end up with a really good result there.
Thank you. That's a really good cabinet and cross-party conversation. Thank you, Paul. That's in the Team Colchester town deal spirit, for that matter. But if we go back to what we're supposed to look at, great diversion, I enjoyed it immensely. We've had a recommendation here, in effect, concerns around governance. So let me just briefly, for the record, address these. So Colchester is the accountable body. Financial controls rest, they should. We do have a structure of boards and delegations of project owners and sponsors and project managers, and there is an oversight to all of that which comes up, as I said, through those boards. But there is no question that this needs some extra sunlight. It's gone through scrutiny processes, but I think it'd be really helpful for members and the public to look at how we can make more visible what's happened and what's happening. I see it as an absolutely essential context for the fresh wave of works that's coming. Everybody likes things that are done, which we can enjoy, places that are open and all the rest of it, but we face a real difficult time while we do some important projects like St Botolph's. So one of the points I've made to County today is we have to be absolutely all over the comms. It has to be joint, and as the DCE has reminded me, one way of doing that is a joint delivery unit between the County Council and ourselves. They'll have their own highways governance processes. We will have more of a handle on that before, but responsibilities have to rest in the right kind of place. What Team Colchester does, as Councillor Dundas was acknowledging earlier, is to make it easier to talk a partnership that's more real. And thank you, Councillor Coyle, for your remarks before. It's been a long, slow process. We've been the best place that I've seen, certainly as my time as a as a member, absolutely essential to have that close relationship. And there's a funny old thing, it's going to be unavoidable as we head into LGR. So this is practice and prep for the future. I'll stop at that. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you. I'm just looking at the recommendation to Cabinet again and looking at the final sentence, which says, therefore recommends that Cabinet consider the matter and make a clear delegation of authority to Essex County Council for project management. I'm not sure.
Well, my point's been made that
we've agreed. So
let me.
Yeah.
These delegations, I tried to explain, are in place. We have a board structure that covers how we work together, and Chris, you're better placed than most to know it. You've been inside it and seen it. I think the recommendation can't be accepted in the form that it's described, right? So the decision is to thank the Environment and Sustainability Panel for their observations and their work on this, to acknowledge that they are right to point to concerns around governance and the need for us to be clear between councils and the authorities and publicly as to what those arrangements are, but they are, as described, inconsistent with our accountable responsibilities as two local authorities working in partnership. So if you can make sense of that, Richard, first of all, good luck. But I think the key should be clear that we accept that a good point's been well made, that governance could be clearer, and we will make sure that between us we do, with the County Council, come to an agreed way of presenting that, and we will share that with members. Would that be a reasonable capture of where we should go? Looking round. Chris, thank you. The bell tolls. Item 8.1, greening street care and safety fit for the future. Councillor Goss.
I'm not going to spend too long on this simply because this has been through various meetings at various stages and it had a long airing at scrutiny recently. Bottom line is our contract with ID Verdi ends in October 2026 and therefore we need to take provision, as it's only a year away, to bring that service into a different direction, and the direction is to bring it back in-house in a cost-effective manner that also takes into account cost increases that will have happened during the contract with ID Verdi, and also the fact that we are having to make changes to budgets at this time as well. And longer term, we have to take into account the fact that we, as an organisation, will no longer exist in this form and will re-emerge in 2027 onwards as a different set of councils, including the closure of Essex eventually. So this paper has two very clear recommendations under 2.1 and 2.2, and it is to proceed with negotiations with Amphora to bring the grounds maintenance service from the 1st of November for a period of 5 years with a break clause at 3, with negotiations clearly set out with the service delivery model with a budget of around 1.9 million. And then the second is to give delegated authority to me, the portfolio holder, or whoever replaces me in this tenure, and to go with 2.1, to not result in an agreed affordable bid from Amphora to deliver the grounds maintenance contract, or any eventual bid from Amphora results in a budget cost that is unaffordable. So there is an envelope to work in. I think it's fair to say, if we'd kept this outsourced, then the budget provision would have had to have gone up by at least 20% because of changes in the market, labour costs, increased national insurance, etc., etc. The one thing I will say about the existing contract is that it reduced any inflationary increases to literally inflation or RPI. There's a slightly different calculation used, but in essence it's the same thing. At least by bringing it back in-house, we can control that cost and outmanoeuvre any profitability and market increase in cost. So I think this is the most cost-effective approach given the budget constraints, but secondly, will give us more control because in effect, although it's under Amphora, it's part of the Colchester City Council group of companies in the same way that Colchester Borough Homes still has a contract in place because, as we know, CBH is an arm's length management organisation, and in effect Amphora would still have that same contractual obligation, but it would be KPI driven. And what I will say is that I'm confident we will not be reducing cuts any further because you can't cut the grass any less than we already do, because frankly it's not enough as it is. So I would hope that we can increase what we do and also have more flexibility with our team. So I'm recommending 2.1 and 2.2 to you, or welcome any comments, but to be fair, I think this has been through several years of good, open, transparent discussion and our aspiration of a council to bring this closer and in-house to mirror neighbourhood services, leisure services and also our waste services. That then fits that whole ethos of public service but done in a cost-effective manner.
Thank you. We should note that we have recommendations from a review of this. As you say, it's been done thoughtfully and in the way of these things, sometimes too often, but certainly done thoughtfully. And the recommendations are supportive of the paper and your position. Members, are you content? Agreed. Thank you. In which case we go to item 8.2, a review of Colchester's greening policy. And we have two speakers, or at least we have one who wants something read out on his behalf, which is Councillor Gocher first of all, and then Councillor Faulkner Kamal, if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you, Chair. This is a statement from Councillor Gocher, which has to be read out on his behalf. And the statement is as follows. Apologies, but I cannot attend in person tonight due to a clash with work at the Sixth Form College's open evening for prospective students. However, I'd like to make clear my opposition to the recommendation by the Environment and Sustainability Panel that glyphosate use be significantly increased by Colchester Council again, part reversing the end of widespread use brought in by Councillor Mark Corey's administration a few years back. Firstly, I want to make it clear there has never been a total 100% ban. Glyphosate is still used to eradicate Japanese knotweed, and this is a reasonable and common sense compromise due to that weed's pernicious nature. As such, it is absurd to use arguments about protecting the Roman wall or heritage sites as an excuse to lever in a return to glyphosate use on kids' plays areas and any other sites where officers deem it necessary. Reasonable exemptions can currently be made without changing policy, and protecting the Roman wall would be such a case. You are no doubt fully aware of the Johnson versus Monsanto case in the USA, where Dwayne Johnson, a groundsman, was awarded $289 million in damages after being diagnosed with cancer. Whether there is a scientific consensus or not is beside the point. If there is any possible risk to children's actions by public bodies, it is also beside the point to raise that ECC still use the chemical on pavements as an excuse for us using it. Such arguments basically boil down to they do bad things, so we can do bad things. That way of thinking leads to abandonment of ethical responsibility for one's actions. As regards kids' playgrounds, parents don't want this. I think most parents would rather their children get stung by the odd nettle than be exposed to a chemical that could have a far greater impact on their long-term health. Not that play areas should have nettles on them. Properly constructed and maintained play areas won't. If neglected and badly maintained, then they may. The answer is to do some good old-fashioned work rather than to take the easy option and put kids at risk of harm as a result. If option C is adopted, then who will police this? Who will be checking that officers only use one spot of glyphosate on a leaf? Who will check and monitor that the use is absolutely necessary? How is necessary defined and by what criteria? This would be a return to widespread glyphosate use by the City Council, however it's dressed up. It is concerning that Colchester Council has not made fuller approaches to tendering and Braintree councils with a view to joint purchase of foam stream equipment and joint use. Colchester should be leading the way on this rather than looking to backtrack. So in a nutshell, make reasonable and sensible compromises to protect heritage. The current policy allows this. therefore reject option C and keep our play areas and public spaces glyphosate free. And that's the end of the statement, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed. Kamal, please.
Mr. Leader, Miss Deputy Leader, ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you tonight in my red rose smart jeans, my carefully ironed floral shirt with liberal orange leaves, and my hair gently swerved to form a presentable man bun. However, I will not claim to be the... Sorry, it's gone? Oh, it's back. However, I will not claim to be the Iron Knight of flowers of the Western world. Nevertheless, I'm here to defend residents' right to enjoy our parks and neighborhoods without worrying that their kids or pets will be contaminated by carcinogenic pesticides. I already received emails from members of the CO1 North Residents Association and Roman and Castle Road Resident Association, latter which has been proudly and inspiringly glyphosate-free for many years. Now, moving away from the Thatcher's historic moment to be humorous, I would now to move my serious points. Since last year, to support the officers and help build networks, I have personally written to 5 neighboring town, city and district councils and exchanged ideas with mayors, deputy mayors and cabinet members. I also organized a public meeting with residents associations, environmental groups and Pan-UK's policy lead. In addition to this, I held a meeting with the chair of ESB and officers to discuss alternatives, and equally I was impressed with the work that our officers took and indeed included a well-drafted community volunteer scheme, something which the Green Group promoted and something which received much appreciated support and endorsement from the last cabinet, particularly from Councillors Corey, Luxford Vaughan and Smith. Yet, less than 2 weeks ago, in an embarrassing environment panel meeting where one political group failed to send a substitute and half of the sitting 4 councillors publicly admitted that they haven't read the agenda thoroughly, a shocking decision to endorse the reintroduction of glyphosate rather than creating and integrating a community volunteer scheme was made. During this disappointing meeting, none of the committee members mentioned the words wildlife, biodiversity, children's health, or environmental health, and it took the ESB less than 20 minutes to have a discussion and a vote. As I previously shared with all councillors, this summer a groundbreaking research linking glyphosate to cancer was published, confirming that glyphosate and glyphosate-based herbicides cause multiple types of cancer, even at exposure levels deemed to be safe by the EU, forcing several governments to review their support for the world's most popular weed killer. This study, which was the most comprehensive global study ever conducted on glyphosate and included a UK-based contributor, Professor Michael of King College London, was neither mentioned in the committee reports nor by the councillors. I am confident that in this room, lit by more than 108 light bulbs, that I'm not the only councillor who is concerned about toxic chemicals. I hope tonight the Cabinet will correct ESB's poor consideration and recommendation, which was produced without sufficient attentiveness. I hope you who have greater power and therefore greater responsibility will make a sound decision and emerge and endorse options 1 and 2, which will reduce anticipated costs and create physically active and social communities. We already have a community volunteers coordinator which supports litter warriors and branching out, and we already have hundreds of volunteers in our database. During the last community volunteers meeting, businesses, charities, and other groups expressed their willingness to assist us both with costs and volunteers, so we should be leaders and innovators rather than appease old ways. As I mentioned earlier, I will be happy to allocate funds from my locality budget to buy relevant gadgets and encourage others to do the same. On a final note, in the future, I'd appreciate it if we all could show that we really care about our residents' health and wildlife through our actions, not just words, and proactively work to identify potential partners and make things work, rather than adopt a dismissive manner and say it is not our problem what other parties are thinking or people aren't here on the panel. Thank you.
Thank you too, and for the audience participation. At least we know there's enthusiasm for some of the things the council might or might not do. So we'll have, given the length of our other business, we'll have a brief conversation. If I can ask members around the table. Let me just start it off respectfully. I think we shouldn't talk down the work of fellow members. We don't know all that they know. We know that members have different levels of understanding. That's just a reality. And our committees are intended to bring together both the specialist officers, specialist advice, and provide a forum for a conversation that takes us at least a step further forward. In this case, takes us to here. So I think we should just respect our fellow colleagues, whether we agree with them or not. We will be thoughtful here, is my promise, but I'm not going to get to the end of the conversation which committee members want to contribute. All I will say, and I'll say it at the end, is that there's a context always, and I'll do the uncomfortable bit which nobody wants to hear. This is still a licensed product used widely up and down the country and internationally. We know where the research is going, I think, that much is really plain. But that's being under review, and no doubt we'll hear in due time from the EU and others from their agencies what they think of that. But this isn't straightforward for one other reason. Money, right? Every decision we make will be a challenge to other parts of the budget and other parts of the service we provide, including looking after our play parks and greening. But I'm starting to cover ground that others might want to. So we'll come back. Let's go around the circle briefly if we can, which are never going to happen because I've got at least 5 hands up. So I'm going to start with you, Julie, if we might, and we'll walk around. We'll go round in a circle rather than dart around.
I think we as councillors need to be very mindful of how we talk about each other. We spend a lot of time talking about being a city of sanctuary, demonstrating tolerance and respect to others, and we need to afford that to each other in this authority. I don't think anybody who heard the reasons why the Labour group couldn't field a representative on that night would actually question the decision of that individual to go and sit with her dying father, who subsequently died. She was called away at short notice, and that short notice meant that it wasn't possible for us to field an alternative member to sit on that panel. And I think it's really important to say that, because I know that's being circulated widely in the community about Labour not fielding a representative on that particular evening. And I think the actions of that councillor is one we probably would all take, because we have to balance our responsibilities here to our own family every day, actually. So I just wanted to point that out, Chair, to make that absolutely clear. I think there is a good level of volunteering that goes on, that people do go out and do a lot of work in the community in terms of cutting back hedges, clearing play parks. It takes many hours, actually, and we need to celebrate and commend those individuals for doing so. We don't always get the credit for it, but I think, the public do see that this is the council's responsibility to undertake those tasks. And I think we've got a job of work to actually move that debate on to get to a stage where I think that we heard earlier about our responsibilities to each other in our communities, and part of that is the work that people do as a volunteer clearing play parks. I think there's a job of work for us to do as an authority in terms of prioritising what we do in the greening team. So I absolutely agree with Kamal that play parks need to be at the top of the list, because if we can't make those safe spaces for children to get out and exercise and play, that has to be our top of the list of stuff to do. If other areas are perhaps little less kempt than they have been in the past, with, you know, fewer cuts, then that is, you know, may seem to be unsightly, but it's something that's not causing so much harm. But play parks have to be at the top of the list of dealing with that. The health and wellbeing group are going to look at volunteering. It is something that we've talked a lot about in the past. I'm doing some work with bringing community payback on board, and that will really help, and we need to sort of use those avenues and those relationships with groups, the volunteer groups as well. British, I can't even remember how it's phrased, but I had an email only this week actually from Michael Padmore, who lives in Wivenhoe. He does a lot of conservation work, and he wants to do more in actually Salary Brook areas, so I've connected him up with the health service actually to make those connections and do that work. So I think there's more we can do with that, and I know, Leader, you'll want to talk about the budgetary implications and how we're going to take this forward. I'll leave it there, thanks.
Thank you. Just to agree with Julie about the points of play parks, I absolutely agree. And Councillor Goss, I'm sure, will focus on that. We are investing, as we talked about earlier, in play parks and making a modernisation of them. So let's try and make them as sustainable as possible in looking after them. I would say that weeds are just plants in the wrong place, and we do need to love our weeds a bit more. Some are a bit more dangerous, but then so are horticultural and manufactured sort of plants that we have as well in our borders. So it may not be a surprise, Leader, that when I was Leader of the Council and we ended the use of glyphosate, I've not changed my decision, and I've made that clear to you and the rest of Cabinet. So I cannot support this recommendation. I do like recommendation 1 and 2 and how we could make that work, but essentially I would not have changed my position. And I don't want to take my colleague Andrea's words away, but she said something to me the other day that we are making difficult choices and efficiencies and cuts at the council. And Anna, as our Section 151 lead, will know that I'm taking that very seriously in my resources portfolio. But these are decisions that we take in order to take the principled decisions, and I want to remain principled on this decision not using glyphosate. That said, I'm not saying it's a dishonourable thing to entertain all options, and I do think some of the wording used, and Councillor Goetcher put some words on Facebook the other day that I wanted to speak to him about and counteract, because I do think we need to have respect in every debate that we have, whether we think people are completely wrong or not. Now, there's sometimes times where people cross the boundaries, absolutely, but having discussions at committees is not that. And as Julie said, respect for what colleagues' reasons are for not turning up is something else as well. We care fundamentally about the residents' health, and we make a lot of decisions to promote their health and well-being. The play parks is one example today. Many of the joint pieces of work we do with our health partners as well. So I would say we are focusing on that, and this decision is just part of that. One point from Councillor Goetcher's memo I do think is important is the monitoring of use, and I don't think that can be fully checked. So that's another reason that I do agree with. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll pass on to whoever next would like to speak. Just make a point, we're not making a decision. So principled where we stand, we have to make something, we have to make a judgment as a cabinet, which is uncomfortable, because that squeezes our personal positions, and I'm in no particularly different place, Mark, but I just want to be that clear for the record. Please.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you for the resident who's come to speak on this eloquently and passionately as well, because you're giving up your evening to do that and obviously listen to us, which is never the most exciting. So where I am on this is similar to Mark, and you know, I've got environment in my portfolio. I don't think I'd be doing my job properly if I was supporting this. And the budget is a concern, but I do think we can be more creative around how we find these savings. I think some recommendations have been made that have been rejected almost out of hand. Maybe I'm wrong there. We do know that there are probably volunteers who will do some of this stuff, and some of it is behavioural change. I usually get, if I do it, just a litter pick in my spare time because I want to tidy up a street, I'm not doing that just for a photo op. I'm hoping other people see that and go, you know what, I'll join in, or I won't drop litter. But other people go, oh, that's the council's job. Well, actually, no, it's not the council's job to pick up litter. We shouldn't be dropping litter at all. And similar with this, a lot of people go, oh, back in the day, people used to look after the front of their house and clear the weeds. Why does no one do that anymore? Why can't the council enforce that? And I go, well, because it was never a law. It was just what people did. And we do need to bring that sense of community back. Because for me, there's lots of parents that want to use these play parks. Actually, if you say to them, look, once a year, if all of you helped and gave up half an hour, we would clear these stinging nettles and whatever there are. I don't think all the play parks are affected. I know the ones in my ward seem fine. Obviously, I know Councillor Young was dealing with some quite significant thistles in her play park, and that may just be where the placing is. But for me, I think it would be a backward step to go to glyphosates at the moment. Obviously, we'll discuss that as a council, but I think we need to be more creative about how we do make these savings moving forward, but willing to listen to other views, but that's where I am at the moment.
So there's been a lot of conversations on this subject over the last couple of years, but I'm going to take a wider view. The county council uses glyphosate to spray the weeds in roads, and they do that twice a year. They used to do it 3 times a year, and they do it by having somebody wearing PPE, driving around on a mini buggy, and they try and get around as much of the city and spray that twice a year. And I actually went out with Tom Cunningham, who is the councillor responsible for highways. We actually went to look at, guess what, some really overgrown weeds coming out of pavement at Mile End in fairly new infrastructure, Axial Way and Via Urbis Romani. Now, we also have to remember there are 193,000 residents in Colchester, shortly to approach 200,000. In fact, my figures are probably slightly out of date. And I do get significant complaints about weeds growing out of highways, and people think Colchester looks pretty poor because of it. So absolutely, we have some residents that want things to be left green, to go wild, etc. But we also have a significant pool of residents who have the absolute antithesis view. And as councillors, we have to balance off trying to ensure the equilibrium is fair. And that's the challenge that we have. Now, you've heard us all talk about tonight, including for Sir Bob Russell, sadly he's gone, we are going to be merging councils. So that problem or challenge of getting the weeds out of highways will become that of new unitary authorities. So there will be a debate, do we use glyphosate in highways terms to go and spray it in all the roads in Colchester, which is what happens now. Okay, what happens now. And at the moment, according to the Health and Safety Executive's website, because I've looked it up tonight, this product is licensed until the 15th of December 2026. And I've looked this up previously and they extend it. And absolutely, there may be a change. We have had numerous conversations with ID Verdi about alternatives and cost, okay? And I use weed killer, but I don't use glyphosate weed killer in my garden. I use non-glyphosate. and both products are available. And I do say that the non-glyphosate weed killer is less effective because weeds grow back in my driveway or whatever. You cannot run public services using volunteers, right? I've said this all along. Absolutely, the voluntary sector has a part to play and it always will. I go out litter picking every day of the week. I do it 7 days a week, and that's a known fact, but I don't put it all over Facebook and put myself in danger in the middle of main roads in the A12, but that's my choice. However, I do less cutting back and pulling weeds up. Litter is my thing. Lee is right, litter is different, it's perennial. I'm not trying to make a link there to weeds, but the public drop it. What the public don't do is plant weeds. And I certainly showed Tom some issues, which is going to need a different approach. You can't just spray what I showed him with weed killer, and he described them as bushes. And buddleia is the worst, because once that gets hold, that is hard to treat. So the reason I'm putting this in a wider context, this isn't just about a few play parks, and this isn't just about the Roman wall. You cannot use foam technology on the Roman wall. You simply can't do that. So you have to look at alternatives, because I'm sure the public wouldn't thank us if it fell down. We've had all the trouble with Middle Mill collapsing. We don't want the Roman wall to collapse. And actually some of the alternative technologies like hot foam doesn't work particularly well and is expensive because other councils have rowed back from it. It costs a lot of money. But we've talked about flamethrowers. We've looked at all these. We have spoken to Tender and we have spoken to Braintree because we're having to talk about how we're going to bring these services together, how we collect the bins, how we cut the grass, because we can't work in 3 different ways. I'm putting this in a more strategic context because there has to be a much more adult conversation. And one of the things I suggested was if we did have to use droplets or a droplet in a very, very defined case where it was sanctioned because no other route was allowed, the management control around that would be that the head of service has to agree it, and I as the portfolio holder would have to agree it. That is about the most governance you could possibly put around what is an operational task. So that was one of the other ideas I came up with, because we can't have, we had Broadlands Way as an example, where I actually, with Mike Hogg, physically pulled out thistles and weeds. So I do actually do some greening stuff, but it's not my favourite community activity. And we pulled out loads of them. Hands were knackered, legs were knackered. It's not a nice, pleasant task. And to just put the final bit of context, right? The Rotary Club is a fantastic organisation like Round Table and some of the other organisations that raise money, do community events. There is a huge issue with volunteers. So the people that are retiring now, right, in their 60s, they are not coming through to replace and backfill people in the Rotary Club and other community organisations. This is fact from speaking to people. So the people that are doing stuff are getting older or retiring from volunteering in their 80s, but the next generation doesn't seem to be coming through. And that for me is a huge, huge concern, that people seem to want to volunteer less or have less time or go on more holidays or do whatever it is their time. That is their human right? So we can't force people to do this. But it comes back to, we are in a budget crisis in this country, and you cannot run public services based on volunteers, because if I don't want to go out and litter pick tomorrow, or I go on holiday, it's unlikely to get the same care and attention than if I give it. And Mile End looks pretty blooming clean, trust me, because we take pride. You go to other parts of Colchester and it's litter picked and there's litter back the next day. And there's a whole conversation to have about that. But I think those are what I want to say is that we are going to have an adult conversation as a unitary authority about what we do about roads, about what we do about other issues, and we do represent 193 to 200,000 people, and there are opposing views. We're not making a decision tonight, but I just wanted to add that context. I will pick up on some of the ridiculous nonsense that was put on Facebook, giving misinformation about the Environment Panel made a decision. They did not. They don't have the power. They can only recommend. That misinformation I did pick up in public with Mark, and then I saw it reproduced in an election leaflet, which is the agent I could have raised as misinformation. I didn't. But I just want to make the point, respect is two ways, and so is fact. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Andrea and Chris, if we can add something rather than repeat.
Brief. I understand. I'm just going to say my past experience of glyphosates, and I haven't used them since they were banned Wivenhoe Town Council because I understood why, don't actually kill the sort of weeds that grow in my garden. If I want to get rid of something, I actually have to dig out the roots. Bamboo goes miles and miles and miles. So the only thing I know that works apart from digging is putting black plastic over it and starving it of oxygen, well not oxygen but rain and sunlight. So I'm not even sure that glyphosate is particularly effective with some of the problems we've got. But I did, thank you Kamal, when you sent the link to the new evidence being presented earlier this year, I did watch that, with mild horror. The increased proportion of, in animal testing obviously, increased proportion of cancers in rats. Possibly more disturbing was the fact that boy rats were turning into girl rats and getting girl-related cancers. Now, obviously rats aren't human beings, we don't have that evidence yet one way or the other, but those statistics were fairly shocking, and I don't think that you can argue with them. What you can argue is that, one, that hasn't fed into the system yet, and two, it hasn't been tested on people. I've had cancer. I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy or his dog or his cat. My thing would be, let's have some caution here to be preventative. I don't want in 2 years' time to find out actually all of that testing was right and now our staff or our residents are developing cancers. I know, I don't want to steal his thunder, I know Chris is going to talk about the regulatory body and the fact that they're reviewing that evidence. For me, that's critical. But in the meantime, we shouldn't be making decisions we can't qualify. And that's probably all I really want to say.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Pearson, Chris.
Thank you. And I have a lot of sympathy with the Have Your Say speaker, and it's good to see that you brought family and support as well, and to see that the younger generation are keen on making the right decisions going forward. I think, though, we need to be mindful of evidence that's in front of us and evidence-based decision-making. None of us around this table are experts on herbicides or on glyphosate. I have a particular issue personally with sweeteners, right? And I know that the government's been pushing sweeteners as the alternative. I pulled up something on artificial sweeteners. There have been lots of studies on artificial sweeteners. Some of those studies have suggested that some of those sweeteners may be carcinogenic, but there is no definitive evidence. So I've taken a personal decision to not use anything that has sweetener in it. That's a personal decision, and that goes back to my experience back in the 70s, just showing my age, of cyclamates. And cyclamates was an artificial sweetener that was used in soft drinks and other food products. Very quickly, once there was definitive evidence that it was carcinogenic, it was removed from the marketplace, and it has been ever since. So that's the situation with sweeteners. We're in a similar situation, I think, with glyphosate. And I looked at the European Commission's website earlier because they've reviewed the use of glyphosate now twice in the last 10 years, and they have given approval for it to be used until 2031, subject to any other evidence coming forward that indicates alternatively. And I read today that the Commission has mandated, I'm quoting here, the Commission has mandated the European Chemicals Agency and the European Food Safety Authority to ask the study authors, so that's of this report, to provide all of the raw data without delay, and when that data is received, to conduct a robust and thorough scientific evaluation as to whether the new information, considered alongside other available data, changes their previous conclusions concerning the hazard or risk assessment conducted for glyphosate. And I don't use glyphosate, again, because I am opposed to it, but when the experts say that they still approve it, I have to go along with that expert evaluation. And that's where I'm at tonight. So I still have personal animosity towards using herbicides, and I know what they could do. I'm, because of my upbringing, I'm fully aware of what Agent Orange was. Anyone who isn't, go and look it up. And as Andrea's already pointed out, I've suffered with cancer as well in the last year that I've had to have treated. So I'm familiar with the concerns that everyone will have about some of the things that we do to ourselves, but we continue to do them. We drive around still in our own vehicles, mostly, most of us. I'm trying to reduce my use of my own vehicle, and we've got one vehicle that is all electric, but nevertheless there are anxieties about the production of all electric. So it's a difficult catch-22, I think, that we're in, that we somehow have to find a way through using the best advice and the expertise that we have in front of us.
Right, thank you. I think that just about covers everything. I'll allow you, Kamal, to have a brief response, and then I shall close this discussion.
Thank you. Dear colleagues, thank you for your points and responses. As a Green councillor working with all parties, I'm trying to be a critical friend, providing constructive feedback. And although I'm concerned that ESB is failing to act as a critical friend in providing challenge, promoting innovative environmental practices, and considering key policy proposals with a clear climate or ecological focus, I'm thankful for Councillor Young, Corey Scordis, Luxor Vaughan's support and endorsement, and I'll conclude at that. Thank you very much, David.
No, thank you, Kamal, and I know how thoughtful you are, that you would have listened to our council about how these things can be best shared, and that really matters, because in the chamber and beyond it, there's lots of things we're completely united on, not least this fantastic place at its best, this city of Sanctuary, and it depends on all of us to put our arms around each other and sort of stay together where we can, and if we must differ as little as we can. Perhaps that's self-description of how I try to go about my business, but I know that that is true for many of us, and we've got LGR to get through, we've got financial crisis to the country, which is trickling through to us, no surprise. We've got to get through that, so the more we can stay together and do things offline, the better. But we all respect, your passion for your causes, and thank you. Look, I want to try and capture, without repeating it all, what we've said tonight, which is we are the same people who are in the same carders who supported a ban on glyphosate as a full council. We've just got some real practical issues to address, and they've been flagged to us thus again for decision by the Environment Sustainability Committee. Now, we're not in a position to make a decision tonight, not least because we have to do two things. We need to have that conversation with our partners, because we will be one local authority. not so far away from now. So we have to talk through what will be a decision for them, whoever they may be. Maybe some of us may not be. And we have to, because there are consequences for choices financially. We have to weigh that up at least. I think there's scope in that time, in those coming weeks, to look at some of the points that have been made around volunteering, its limitations, and acknowledging the Deputy Leader's work on community payback, and Kamal, your work with volunteers, to see where that's left us. So I'm recommending that we defer. We thank the committee for their thoughtfulness, and I am sure that they have been thoughtful for bringing this subject back to us. We have to make a decision, but to defer that decision until we can gather that evidence and review this alive to the budgetary consequences. But our empathy is absolutely in the same place as our audience tonight. You know, we want to look after each other. In all our forms, life is precious, but we do have to be thoughtful, and I hope you listening have found it thoughtful. Are we content? Thank you. Right, some of you will be having crossed legs, so I'm so sorry, Martin, Councillor Martin Parsons there, waiting patiently. Thank you for that. 10 minutes and then back, please.
There it is, it's working now. So it just comes and goes. Yeah.
Martin, you're very welcome. Thank you for staying with us. Some items have to be down the agenda. It's just the way of these things. So welcome anyway.
Thank you, Leader. I'm reminded of the story of the vicar whose microphone wasn't working in church, and he tapped it and said, "There seems to be something wrong with this microphone," and the congregation automatically replied, "And also with you." I'd like to talk to Cabinet this evening about integrity in public life. I've got two council documents in my hands. The first one is a report that the council recently submitted to the government on adaptation to climate change. It's under the auspices of Section 62 of the 2008 Climate Change Act, which can require the Secretary of State to, allows the Secretary of State to require any public authority to produce a report on that. And that report has to have three sections. First of all, how climate change will affect the responsibilities of that public authority. Secondly, what plan that public authority has got to mitigate it. And thirdly, a progress report. How well were you doing, guys? This is an absolutely excellent and outstanding report. And I think officers who prepared this should be commended on it. It's also an extremely balanced report. So it doesn't just deal with kind of global issues, it deals with local ones as well. So, for example, there are 70 references to local flooding risk. That includes both pluvial, with a P, that's the rainwater flooding, and also coastal flooding. There are 6 references to coastal erosion risk. There are 6 references to the increased risk of wildfires. Now, I think if we all remember back to Wennington, the village 3 years ago on the London-Essex border, where a complete street of houses was burnt out by wildfire, and we are in one of the most water-stressed parts of the country. I think we realise that's a particular issue, and we have got a number of settlements, some of them quite big, where there's essentially only one road in and out, and a number of others, such as Wivenhoe, where that's
almost the situation. And there is perhaps an issue where we need to consider planning policies there. Now, as I said, this is an extremely good report. This is the report that you're looking at tonight, which is the action plan on climate change, which we said is our top priority. Now, none of those things that I've just mentioned there, those pluvial and coastal flooding risks, coastal erosion risk of wildfires, none of these are actually mentioned in there. So whilst we've got a very balanced report on adaptation to climate change to the government, and it's number 2 on the DEFRA website. So you go onto it and you will see Blackpool and then Colchester's report. Here we've got one that puts us in the position where we're saying one thing to government, and actually in the action plan, we're doing something rather different. That creates not just a problem of integrity, it could create a headline in the Colchester Gazette. Even worse, should a government minister happen to stumble on it because some clever dick special advisor found it and said, look how good Colchester City Council are doing, we'd end up with a Daily Mail headline saying, Colchester Council claims praised by minister, actually he's not doing that stuff at all. Now, there are 2 possible options for the council to deal with that issue. One is they could withdraw the government report, and I think that would be a very retrograde step. It would also be extremely disrespectful to the officers who produced it. The other is that instead of approving this tonight, it could adjourn this and then go and look at how it could be rebalanced. We're not talking about extra budget, we're talking about rebalancing. So we address the local impacts of climate change, which are in this very good report to government and is front page of the DEFRA website. And so we do what we say we're doing, which is what integrity really is. Thank you very much.
Well, that's a very interesting take, and thank you. I shall make a point of looking up how we stand. I always like it when we're first, but it's not very often going to happen, is it? No, look, that's very thoughtful, look, and you have been. I'd like to go to Andrea first. I know Lee will have probably a view to offer as well. Let's just walk around this as a cabinet.
Yeah, with Lee's permission, although climate change is now in his portfolio, it historically was in mine, and possibly it's not been enough time to do that transition yet. As far as your recommendations are concerned, I think it's absolutely fine to include all of the things about wildfires, pluvial flooding and coastal flooding in our action plan. My concern comes when it talks, the second part of the recommendation, Cabinet considers including appropriate actions in the Climate Emergency Action Plan to address the impacts of blah, 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 blah. As we've discussed very briefly earlier, we're looking to make significant savings within the council. I know that we've initially done some work talking to tendering, because they're one of the few districts that actually do look at coastal flooding, and the obvious reason is that they are surrounded by coast, and therefore they're probably the best people to have on the ground knowledge of what the problems are. But I need to point out, which you already know, that the flood authority is Essex, and that's both for surface water and for coastal stuff. So although, yes, we could say, what appropriate actions, could be taken, what we possibly can't do, and I don't want to be deceiving anybody, is then take that responsibility ourselves, because we just simply couldn't afford it. I mean, even Essex don't fund a lot of the coastal projects. They get money from the Environment Agency, sometimes they raise money themselves. We have the example here of the Hythe, what is it called, task force. Basically, we couldn't carry on ignoring that problem, and to jolt Essex into taking responsibility, we've set up a task and finish group on that. But I think we need to be very mindful of the budget implications of actually putting actions in there by ourselves.
Thank you. And I think Andrea's articulated that very well. We'd probably be more than happy to add some of this wording, but we need to be realistic with you that some of these issues, again, come down to funding. As you say, not a lot of it is our responsibility. That will change when it becomes a unitary, unless it comes under the mayoral, but I don't believe it will. I believe it will stay with a unitary, and there will be expertise there from tendering. Now, what we have historically is there is a flood committee for Essex, and we've always had a rep on the flood committee as well to make sure that Colchester does have a voice on that. But even then, that does struggle with funding as well. But it does make sure that Colchester's voice is heard. So we do need to be realistic with you. Don't want to lie to you here and say that we're going to add this wording and the world's going to be perfect. I think we're more than happy to accept the wording. It's just we need to be mindful of what we can achieve. It's clearly on our agenda, and I think you're perfectly right and correct to raise the difference in the two documents. So I think that's really where I'll end it, is that we will look at this and see what we can do. And I think moving forward to a unitary is something that we should definitely be looking at, getting that experience in place.
I've got just one comment to come back to you, Martin. So absolutely, thank you. Very well captured our earlier conversations. I will make sure that we take this up with tendering and Braintree. You'll be aware we've got a North East Essex shadow board. Heaven help us, we may have a fourth to join the three. But we know both Uttersford and Malden well. No doubt we can adapt, like to climate change also. So we will have a look at how we could blend our future and blend our resources, but I'm with my colleagues. I don't want to give you a promise that we can't keep. My suggestion would be, and taking your observation earlier, Andrea, that the first point is accepted by Cabinet. The second, we adjust to take out appropriate in the first line, because there'll be too many otherwise, and to add by the appropriate authority in after climate emergency action plan. Now that would put a commitment, Martin, on us to at least say, okay, right, see the above, who should be doing what? And the answer will be Essex primarily, but there will, as we go to LGR, we'll have to be starting to think about what the local authorities in the current or future form should be doing. And I think it will at least go a little bit closer to balancing off the points as I heard them. Back to you.
Thank you, Leader. I did use the word several times, rebalancing. I think when our children were young, we taught them very early age the economic concept of opportunity cost. If you spend it on one thing, if you buy the new plastic dinosaur, you cannot buy the sweeties. And, we are talking about, I don't think any of us are talking about increasing the budget here, but there is a rebalancing between those two aspects, the global and the local. Some of these, though, possible appropriate actions don't necessarily involve cost. So, for example, on the wildfires, let me give you one example. Somewhere like Fingringhoe, which is in my ward, half of that village is on a cul-de-sac. Now, fires jump roads. I've heard from local fire service of East Mersey that happened a couple of years ago. If a fire jumps a road in that situation, the only way to evacuate the local population is across the fields. And that puts the elderly and the vulnerable in an incredibly difficult and very vulnerable situation. So there might perhaps be a planning policy in terms of restricting new developments where we've got those settlements. There's not a huge amount of houses planned at that end in Fingringhoe anyway, but looking forwards, those sorts of planning policies, we might want to think how we could adopt appropriate ones. LGR, David, I was previously a councillor in a council that began the merger process with another council. What we started at the thin end of the wedge, was shared services at the top, and buying in expertise and sharing those, and that may be something you would want to think about, rather than the cliff edge when we actually merge, but the thin wedge beforehand. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are we content to close? Thank you. Agreed as amended. Thank you very much. Thank you, Martin. Item 10.1, which is the calendar meetings for 26-27. We've got recommendations and a paper that supports this, and the calendar itself. We have the ability to change if we have to, but any views on this other than hurrah, we've been looking ahead a year? All right, so agreed? Thank you. Well, I think the item's gone, Kamal, if that's all right. I'm happy to talk to you afterwards, but we've closed the item. The calendar meetings has been closed, and didn't have you listed, whether that's perhaps a misunderstanding. But I hope we've been covered this sufficiently well, and if there is a point to take, then I'm happy to take it offline, if that's okay.
Sure. It's just 2 sentences.
We've voted, Kamal. I think we have to, and I'm conscious it's your time as well as ours and everybody else in the audience. Okay, thank you. Right. Done. So progress of responses to the public. It's your opportunity to start again. You do all the work and you get 2 not.
Thanks, Chair. I have nothing to add to the report.
Okay.
I think it shows they're all done.
Content? In which case we have to go to part B, unless, we've been through this, to make our earlier conversation possible. Are we content? I'm happy to break out if necessary. We content? Do we want to go into part B? Are we content we've had enough conversation?
Content.
Then on that basis, unless officers tell me otherwise, always look very carefully at Mr. Weaver's. I want to hold the DCE here just a bit longer because it's just because I can. Then we're closed. Thank you. That was, in my view, a very good conversation, and I hope the public and those present found it so too. Thank you very much.